potholes for breakfast. It's the only
So it's about time to sparge. You can see I've got my 7-gallon pail here. Now this is what comes with the kit. However, I added one of these pieces of a T-ball, and I'm going to insert that on the inside, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So now you can see how on the inside of the bucket, I took the T strainer part, put it over the inlet, and then screwed an extra thing over the end. The only reason I have the extra piece there is that my first spigot broke, so I had to buy a new one. So I saved all the components from the previous one. Just a recommendation that please take the spigot off and store it separately from your bucket so it doesn't get cracked like my first one did. So even though I mashed separately on my wood stove, I'm still going to use this lovely green bag that I picked up. It's going to go inside my bucket. I'm going to dump the mash into this and then show you how to sparge and to lauter and sparge. So now I'm ready to do the iodine test, just to make sure that it has mashed all the way. There are no residual sugars. So I took a little bit of the mash out, tried to get just as much liquid as I could. And then I'm using this Super Deluxe Rite Aid brand iodine. Make sure you get orange iodine so the test actually works. And here's what we do. We take a drip of this. And as you can see, the color so far remains orange. If there were starches present, it would turn black, but it stays orange. Therefore, we know our mash is done. Now it's time to do Vorloff and dump the mash into my grain bag into the bucket. And now it's time to start lautering. I have a really thick mash. As you can see, I've got it all set up in my bucket with the grain bag and the spigot. And what I love about these, they have a handle. So I have 2 KitchenAid bowls, one to pull off the bottom, and then another one to pour back over the top. I'm also going to use a slotted spoon, which I have right here somewhere, to help diffuse it, so when I pour over the mash, I'm not pouring down the middle, I'm spreading it out. You'll see that in 1 second. So as you can see, I have a slow, steady stream coming out into one bowl. But I'm going to take my mash paddle, you could use any kind of slotted spoon or something, just to pull the grain bag away from the spigot. The idea is not to draw it off as quickly as you can, but rather slowly. This is going to force all of the grains to sink to the bottom and act as a filter bed. There you go. I now have the mash paddle inserted under the grain bag next to the spigot. So I have not only a grain bag and the mash paddle, but also the T-ball filter all built into one. All right, so all of this is going to help prevent clogging. And trust me, clogging is the enemy. Right now, the only thing harder than lautering and sparging by yourself is trying to videotape it at the same time, because it definitely requires 2 hands. So as you can see, there's a short trickle coming out, and when it gets kind of low, I just take my mash paddle and make sure that the grain bag, there we go, is not interfering with the straining. So I now have this one basically full, and I'm going to use the back of my slotted spoon to make sure it disperses evenly over the top. And I'm going to do this for about a half an hour until it starts to run clear. Now this is tough because this is a very, very dark wort. So what I'm going to need to do is get a glass to just look at the clarity of it as I go along. Once it starts to run clear, I'm not going to interrupt the flow whatsoever. Instead, I'm going to get a pot and I'm going to start draining the wort and then slowly putting my sparge water, which is at 170, right over the top to help rinse the grains without squishing the bag, without disrupting the grains. This is tough. Not sure how well you can see this, but you can hopefully see that it's very, very cloudy and chunky looking. All right, this is the beginning of the sparge. Right now, I'm still working on slowly lautering and sparging. Okay, you can see a nice slow stream coming out. And again, using the slotted spoon, double-fisted, budget a half an hour at least for this. And I'll show you what it looks like again when we're done. Here's a better shot of exactly how cloudy it is coming out of there. All right, and it's a very steady stream, but it's really chunky and cloudy. If you were to just take this liquid and try to boil it down, you'd wind up with so much sediment you wouldn't yield any beer. So the purpose of lautering and sparging is to make sure you get the chunks out so you get more beer. Little note, gravity. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. So gravity is your friend. Use gravity to your advantage. I suppose at some point it's probably also worth mentioning that this is a rye-based beer, and if you've never brewed with rye, it's a much skinnier grain, so you have to grind it separately from your barley because it takes a different setting on the grist mill. Speaking of which, totally recommend getting one of these puppies. The grist mill is amazing for the KitchenAid mixer. Well worth it. And the nice thing about this is it's totally metal, easy to clean, completely adjustable, customizable, depending on what grain you're using. But if you read up on rye-based beers, you know that rye is also a gummy grain. So I use rye malt, but still, it's very prone to stuck mashes. So a little extra precaution is always a good thing. So far, so good. It's still running a little cloudy, but we'll see how that goes. So I've been lautering for about 20 minutes now. I'm going to take this small glass and pull some off. I don't know if you can see. It's still got a lot of chunks in it. This has been a very difficult brew to sparge, mainly due to the rye. But hopefully in about another 15 minutes or so, it should be running clear. And then it'll be time. Okay, it's starting to run clear. Almost clear. So what I'm going to do is transfer and start letting it drain into my kettle, or one of my kettles. And then I'm going to take the hot water, and instead of pouring the wort over the top, as I've been doing, I'm going to pour the warm, not too hot, 170 max, over the top. And that's going to start draining it. And I'll show you what that looks like very soon. So as you can see now, the wort is draining into one of my kettles. And I now have the warm sparge water, same spoon, and start pouring over the top. And I'll show you what that looks like as soon as it starts to clear. I don't know how well you can see this, but the grains have completely sunk to the bottom. And I have a good flow coming out, not too fast, not too. Let's see how clear that is. I'm ready to switch over to my second kettle. And then I'm going to transfer back and forth until I have roughly an even amount of malt between both kettles. But it is a really nice, clear wort in there. In a minute, you'll see. So here we are, about 45 minutes total from the time I started Vorloff. And I've been putting the warm liquor over the top, and hopefully you can kind of see that the liquid is now starting to run a little more clearly, and that's what we're hoping for. And soon it will all be drained out, and I'll have about 8 gallons to boil, hopefully yielding about 5.5 gallons total. So, what to do when you're all done sparging and lautering? Well, see, I have my third pot here. Get a nice drizzle going on. And up top, you can see I made a tourniquet out of, yep, you guessed it, a grill fork. And you take the grain bag, wrap it around, tie it tight, and then you simply twist as needed. Occasionally add some more warm water. You can get all that lovely water into your third pot. Now this third pot is not good for brewing. It's going to have some tannins from the grains and excess proteins. It's not good for brewing. However, it is an excellent source of sugar and protein if you reduce it down into what I like to call vegan demi. And I'll show you some of that later.
Beer bottles for breakfast. It's the only thing on the shelf. Beer bottles for breakfast. Just trying to be myself.